Hey guys, I'm Georgia and welcome back for another episode of my Midweek Mystery series, where today I have another case I've been working closely with the family on to bring more awareness. It is always such an honour when family members or loved ones contact me to talk about the cases and stories of someone close to them, and it is really not a responsibility that I take lightly. So I've been working very closely with Saswati's cousin Anissa to write this video. As always, please be aware that people close to this case may well be reading the comments of this video. So please, even more than usual, I ask you to keep things respectful and kind. The majority of you always do, of course, but there's always that one person, and we don't want to cause the family any more pain than what they're already dealing with here. We're here to spread the story, raise awareness, and help in any way we can. This is a very recent case, so any movement is vital in getting justice, and the family are using the hashtag Justice for Saswati on social media to increase awareness and media coverage. As Anissa has said in an email to me, our family wants the world to know her name, as denying her an identity further makes her a victim. There should be no shame associated to the victim for this crime. None of this was her fault. The people who should be ashamed are the perpetrators. I'm also going to be leaving a link to a change.org petition down below that I ask all of you to go and sign and share if possible to make sure society's voice is heard and justice gets served. The media barely reported on this crime, so it's vital that we spread the word as much as possible. Saswati Jana was 20 years old and a second-year honours student at Deborah College in Midnapore, West Bengal in India, where she studied nutrition. She was from Jana, West Bengal, which is about 168 kilometres away from the college. It was in her own family home in Jana that she was tragically killed, in a state that's actually shown to have lower levels of crime and violence against women. This kind of thing just didn't happen in this area. It was completely unheard of. Saswati was described as having a bright future ahead of her. She was a sweet girl who always stood up for others. She was caring with an abundance of love to give. She loved when people were just kind and would respond by being extra kind in return. Kindness just meant a lot to her. Anissa told me that Saswati was the kind of person who always stood up against injustice, sharing a story of how during COVID, a lot of students at her college were having issues with their online work, as internet and electricity in the village was so limited, as well as struggling to pay their fees. She was the only student who went to the headmistress to explain the situation on behalf of the entire student body, and on the back of that, some changes were made to make it easier for everyone. Tuition was reduced and teachers became more aware of the difficulties. On another occasion, she stood up to 3 men on the bus who were harassing another young woman. Saswati was brave and bold and protected others, always standing up for the right thing. She dreamed of travelling and she loved the internet and the access it gave her to the rest of the world, that sort of escape from reality. She loved reading and had recently started taking singing lessons as well. Anissa's sister Sahini said, "My cousin Saswati was smart, sweet, beautiful and stubborn. I remember once when we were 3 or 4 years old, I wanted her to stop jumping on the bed I was on and she wouldn't, so naturally I bit her. Instead of letting that stop her, she just kept jumping. As we grew older, I admired her persistence. She always knew what she wanted and how to get there. Although she was 2 years younger than me, she always protected me. She'd grab my arm and take me around to the village shops and barter for me when my subpar Bengali skills wouldn't suffice. She stood up for me when the Mehndi artist did a terrible job. She'd talk back to anyone who was rude to me with absolutely no fear at all. I cannot even begin to understand this cruel and evil act, let alone understand that the future will be less bright without her and her contributions. I know she would have loved to know how loved she is. I'm always holding you in the light." It was the 3rd of May 2021, so just a couple of months ago, when Saswati went through the worst things you could possibly imagine at her home in Jamna. Jana is a fairly small place with a population of only 4,000 people. This is an incredibly rural area, and the family's house was about 1 kilometre away from the main road. The next big city is Kolkata, and that's about 130 kilometres away. And as I mentioned before, this isn't the kind of place that big crimes happen. It's a very safe area, or at least it was a safe area. That would change when 3 construction workers, later identified as Bikash Mamu, a man from Belda, Chotu Munda, a man from Jharkhand, and Tapati Patra, a woman from Sabang, brutally raped, tortured and murdered Saswati inside an abandoned part of her own home. Anissa has helped me out with some of the pronunciations in this video, but it goes without saying that I don't speak the language, so if I am pronouncing any of the names or places wrong, then please excuse me, I'm trying. 2 of the culprits, Bikash and Tapati, had been working on construction in the home, building a new kitchen for the family for almost a month. There had never been any issues with either of them, and they were trusted by the family, who even offered them tea and snacks. But for about 10 days prior to the 3rd of May, neither employee came to work and was suddenly reappearing on the 3rd, this time with another person, Chotu Munda, and he was unknown to the family. The 2 workers just claimed that they needed the additional help, and it's not really uncommon to do this in India and just bring in a new employee, so nobody really questioned it. Saswati was last seen by her family around 2:30 p.m. They'd just finished eating lunch and she'd volunteered to do the dishes. As her mum had a heart condition, Saswati offered to help whenever she was able to, so everyone in the family sort of dispersed off to do their own jobs. The last conversation she had with her father was her asking him for the soap. It wouldn't be until around 4 p.m. that the family would notice that Saswati had gone missing and began to search around the house for her. The construction workers were, of course, asked if they'd seen her, and Tapati Patra looked Saswati's dad dead in the eye and tried to convince him that she'd run away from home. Nobody had even considered this to be the case. Saswati had no reason to run away from home. She was happy and loved her family, and didn't even so much as go to the shop without letting people know that she was going out. Clearly, this was not a particularly well thought out crime. The construction workers obviously tried to divert attention from inside the house, and it seems that their big plan was to simply finish up their workday and then leave, never to return again. The family searched the house and called relatives and friends, anyone Saswati might have spoken to recently, and given a clue as to whether she had plans to go anywhere, but of course she hadn't spoken to anyone. After only about 20 minutes, her father and brother found her body, locked in a dark abandoned room in an unused part of the house called the Mud House, which is separate from the main house. As you can imagine, they are still traumatised by what they had to find. Saswati had been brutally raped, assaulted and then murdered, strangled to death by the perpetrators. Taken directly from an email I received from Anissa, the post-mortem confirmed not only the rape followed by manual strangulation, but also made clear the excruciating damage they did to her. They broke her nose and neck, damaged organs and mutilated her body. These monsters truly made Saswati's last moments extremely painful. Imagine how terrified she must have been in these last moments of her life. This happened at home, the place you're meant to be safest, just another violation. Her clothes had been ripped off her body and parts of her clothing had been tied around her neck in an attempt to suffocate her, but her cause of death was manual strangulation. Her father and a cousin tried to give her water to revive her, but it was already too late. The doctor would later say that she'd been dead for around an hour, meaning that the crime had likely occurred between 2:30 and 3:30 p.m, so not long after she was last seen washing the dishes. There is further evidence in the fact that the dishes hadn't even been finished, showing that she was interrupted in the middle of her task. The police were called to the house immediately once Saswati was discovered, and they arrived at the scene within 15 to 20 minutes. Saswati's father immediately filled out something called an FIR, a First Information Report, and police took the 3 workers, the main suspects, immediately in for questioning on the spot, as they were actually still in the house at the time. It seems that their plan was to simply finish off the workday without arousing suspicion before leaving, to never return. Obviously, this plan of theirs backfired. I'm not sure why they think the family wouldn't immediately be concerned about their daughter going missing. The police had the culprits remove their shirts, and both of the males' torsos were covered in scratches from where Saswati had attempted to fight back. All three culprits had changed their clothes after the crime. Their old clothes were found disposed of nearby, complete with bloodstains. And so the evidence was gathered. The culprits' blood-covered clothes, Saswati's clothes, hair and fingernail samples of everyone involved, and a weapon that was used as well. None of this was sent in for DNA testing until the beginning of July, so 2 months after the crime. They're 100% certain that the forensic testing will just prove what they already know, and these 3 people were the culprits. The scratches and the blood are pretty undeniable evidence, as well as the fact that all 3 of them had dirt, which can only be found in the mudroom, on their skin and hair. The family fully believed that this was an organised crime. It wasn't something that just kind of happened in the moment. They had planned every aspect of what they were going to do, and the entire time frame of the crime was just 1 hour. Anissa told Ishi in an interview that she believes this group had committed crimes like this before. At least that's what the group have told the police in interviews. These are deprived individuals who would gain the trust of their victims and their families whilst they waited for the opportune moment to strike, their victims usually from extremely poor families. Before, they would commit their crimes on women/girls in deserted locations and then hide the bodies, not to be found for days. By the time the bodies would have been found, the perpetrators would have moved on. The family don't know exactly how many victims there were before Saswati, but it seems there definitely were some. In terms of Saswati's murder, the perpetrators knew exactly what room in the house to use, they brought a weapon with them, and they studied the patterns of the family to see what time of day would be best to commit this crime. Saswati always had her phone with her. She was 20 years old, of course she did. But she just so happened to not have it with her at the time she was taken, as she was washing the dishes. It's thought that she was targeted because she was petite, kind and helpful. She could have easily been lured away under the guise of helping out the construction workers. In general, she didn't have too much interaction with them whilst they were in the home, so it's not like she did anything to anger them or provoke them. Another indication that this was planned came to light after the suspects had been arrested and taken from the scene. Their contractor arrived at the home via a motorcycle to pick up the woman to party Patra's bag. She'd called him prior to the arrest, telling him that he had to come and get it. Luckily, a family member had the thought not to hand the bag over to the contractor and instead kept it to give to the police. Upon looking inside, they found 2 distinct piles of money, much more money than someone of her status usually would have had in their handbag. Weirdly, the police had taken the bags of the 2 other culprits but had left this one behind. Anissa says that she believes the woman was paid this money for her involvement in the crime, that it was her job to lure Saswati into the dark, abandoned room, because a woman is much more likely to trust another woman. This crime was carefully planned and organised, and it seems like the main way they slipped up is by not realising that Saswati's family would notice that she was gone so soon. This entire crime happened within the span of an hour, a very short window of time for such a horrific crime to be committed, with not much room for error. They managed to incapacitate her so she wouldn't scream and attract the attention of the family. They brought the weapon with them. During the time they worked at the Jana house, they would spend each night in the house of their contractor and personally got to know the family and the home, figuring out how to commit their crime. They studied the patterns and habits of the family. The police have stated that these criminals were very lustful, and had they been able to get their hands on another victim that day, they would have done. They never once showed any emotion as they were being arrested by the police, and thought that if Saswati hadn't been the victim that day, it simply would have been another woman in the household. The contractor they all worked under has been trying since the very first day to get these criminals cleared of all charges. He's put his own money and own resources into helping the culprits, whilst being fully aware and even publicly acknowledging that they did commit this brutal crime and murder, but he thinks they should be free without any repercussions. It's actions and beliefs like his which create the systemic problem of rape in India and all around the world, and if the criminals are not punished, it will send a message that these types of crimes do go unpunished and it's fine to do it. The three perpetrators are accused of rape and murder, as well as criminal conspiracy due to the fact that this was likely a planned crime, and trespassing. The part of the house where Saswati was found, a storage closet in the mud house, was not a part of the home that they should have been in. However, they have not actually been officially arrested for this crime. In India, a charge sheet is required in order to take a case to court. It's something which states what the police found in their investigation. However, if this document, a charge sheet, isn't produced within 90 days, then the culprits cannot be charged with any crimes. When I started working on this script, there hadn't yet been a charge sheet filled out, but I am pleased to say that now there has been. The family made a lot of phone calls pushing for movement and even visited the police station really often, and that pressure paid off. This just goes to show how much putting pressure on authorities can push things along in pretty much any case. It has now been over 3 months since Saswati's murder, and they're not any closer to conviction. This is despite Sankar Chatterjee, the first police officer on the scene, saying, "She had blood all over. I haven't felt so helpless and angry in my 11 years of service as I did after looking at her dead body. It was unbearable to see how she was subjected to such a beastly act." They say they're trying to collect evidence so this case is watertight in court, which this case is now actually going to do. It is now going to court. However, there is still a fear amongst Saswati's family that justice may not be served. Brutal murder and rape cases in the past have been dismissed even with evidence. Even the cases in which murderers and rapists have been convicted still took 10 years through the courts, and that is considered quick. And we don't want to be waiting 10 years in this case. The day after the murder, about 400 students from Saswati's college took to the streets in protest, carrying banners and placards, demanding justice and even the death penalty for her killers. They want the harshest possible punishment so that no criminal thinks to do something similar ever again. The protest went on for several days, and they were even asked to stop by the police, but then the state was put into lockdown because of COVID, and so they sort of had to come to an end temporarily. Talking to The Guardian, a fellow student said of Saswati, "Whenever there were any kind of issues at the college level or anything bigger, she would raise her voice." So they did the same for her. They planned to continue the protest after the lockdown ended, but they received threats from a political party that the women protesting would receive a similar fate if they continued. However, the men vowed to carry on. If you have previously heard of Saswati's case, you've probably heard of it from a very political angle. In the aftermath of the murder, the BJP party, which is one of the 2 major political parties in India, claimed that this crime had occurred because Saswati was one of their supporters, that she'd been killed by their opposition, the TMC party. There had very recently been an election in the state, and the results had only been announced the day before the murder, so on the 2nd of May 2021. The BJP party is currently in power in India, but TMC won West Bengal. BJP probably thought this would be a good time to make their opposition look bad, a bit of political propaganda, but the claims they made simply wasn't true. However, this version of the story quickly blew up on social media, and so naturally this false narrative was all that was reported on in the actual media. and this was the only angle available of Saswati's murder. Of course, any focus on this false narrative just took away from the true story, and from the fact that the 3 perpetrators who were responsible were still yet to be punished. All claims that Saswati was a member of the BJP are false. She didn't have any political connections and neither did her family. Even her Facebook didn't suggest any ties to any particular party. In general, there was very little actual media coverage of this case. Any attention it did receive was from local media from the village and surrounding areas. None of the local news reported any of these political ties simply because they didn't exist. When it came out that the political aspect of this murder was completely false, people mistakenly began to think that the crime as a whole had been fabricated. Even the West Bengal police gave a statement with no mention of Saswati's name that there was a lot of post-election misinformation, saying that a different rape had been entirely fabricated. People thought they were referring to Saswati here, but obviously that was not the case, and it was hugely harmful to the family who had been desperately trying to spread word of her story. It's shocking that such a story wouldn't make national news in India, let alone international news. Even the local leaders have remained silent about what happened. Justice is moving incredibly slowly in this case, and without coverage, there's no pressure for investigators to push it forwards. As Anissa said to me, justice needs to prevail in this case in order to provide a safer society for all women in India. Villagers in the local area have been nervous to venture out since this crime, scared that they will be the next victims, with the perpetrators still not being punished for their crimes. So please use the hashtag #JusticeForSaswati on whatever platform you can, share this video, sign the petition and spread the word. The family are hoping that with enough media coverage, the criminals will receive proper punishment. Through sharing this story, Saswati's family might be able to gain access to invaluable resources such as legal aid and counselling, and the case might be able to be fast-tracked through the court system. Fast-tracked courts in India are reserved for the worst of crimes, and it is proven that media attention has helped fast-track cases similar to this in the past. If the criminals receive punishment here, it will be a deterrent to other potential criminals who might commit similar crimes against women. Saswati's family are truly incredible. In their grief, they are fighting so hard to get justice and ensure accountability here. They are doing incredible things. We've seen time and time again in the true crime community how sharing names, sharing stories can help push the authorities towards justice, and that's what we need in this case. We need that to happen. We need Saswati's name to be out there and her story to be heard. So please help us do that in any way you can. Thank you so much for watching this video. All of the links and sources to anything you need will be down below in the description box, so please, please, please go check that out. Comment on this video if you can, give this a thumbs up or even a thumbs down. Anything is good for the algorithm, just so more people can see this. Go and leave comments on other true crime creators' videos to ask them to share this story. I am a very small fish in a very big pond, and there are creators out there with much bigger followings than me who are able to share this story to even more people. So request it, ask people to talk about this. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.